This is a pretty exciting time in the life of the school. The recent events that are part of our new beginnings process have brought us to this juncture, and I want to kind of review where we are. In our last communication, you learned that we have sold the LeConte Avenue property and that we have entered into a letter of intent with Mills College to co-locate Starr King on the campus of Mills in Oakland. It is a really exciting opportunity for us because of the many common threads we have with Mills. One of the most enduring common threads, in fact, is Aurelia Henry Reinhardt, who was both the first woman moderator of the American Unitarian Association, our predecessor organization, and the longest serving president of Mills College. And so the common values shared by Mills College and by Starr King made this opportunity a really fertile possibility for everybody concerned. I was deeply thrilled when I first heard that Mills College was engaged in a strategic partnership process and that they wanted to find people of similar values to work with them at their campus in East Oakland. We were also very conscious when we began this process that we wanted to maximize the possibilities that many students had asked for. The idea of having green space, the possibility of housing on campus, all those things are possible for us at Mills College. And so when we were presented with this opportunity, we felt that it was too extraordinary an opportunity to pass up. And even though there's a lot of sadness about leaving the longest home we've ever had, the LeConte Avenue property is the fourth place that Starr King has been located at in its 115-year history, but it is the longest tenured home that Starr King has had. Almost everyone in living memory knows Starr King to be on Holy Hill at LeConte Avenue, and so that will be a certain amount of loss for people. At the same time, the Mills campus is incredibly beautiful, has a rich history of its own in relation to the school, has a glorious chapel led by and just lots of amazing things that will be possible for us to attempt to collaborate on. And we're looking forward to negotiating the details of where we will be on the campus. The campus is huge. It's 135 acres. You can be on campus and think you're out in the woods. That's how big it is. They have a farm, they have a lake, they have all kinds of amazing natural resources there. And they have a real commitment in the way that we do to countering white supremacy culture and creating just and sustainable community. They have a far more diverse student body than ours. And it is, in fact, a wonderful opportunity for us to think about possibly campus ministry there in support of Dara Oland, who is, as I said, a Starr King grad. There are just all kinds of amazing things that can happen there. So I'm going to stop talking because I see lots of people here. And please type your questions, I guess, or indicate to Xander in some way that you want to talk. And I'm glad to answer any questions that I am able to. As I've said to you all before, I will be happy to answer questions that I can answer. There are going to be some things I can't answer because they're things I don't know. And some things that I can't answer because we're still in negotiation with certain parties at Mills. So with that, the floor is yours.
Go for it.
I have a couple of questions. My name is Stephanie Kaza. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Stephanie Kaza, I'm graduated in 1991, and I'm now in Portland, Oregon, associated with the First Unitarian Church. And I did write you a letter, and I happen to be in Berkeley this week, so I'm glad to be here to say goodbye to this beautiful building, which I expect to be probably raised, but we'll see. But if Berkeley, if UC Berkeley has bought the building, I think, right, of the property, that's one question. What will actually happen to this building? Will it be retained in any way? Or do we need to say goodbye to all the history and all the love and the community that's formed here? I'd like to know about the relationship to the GTU and what's happening to the GTU and the library. I know there's a possible rosy future ahead, but I also know liberal arts colleges are struggling all around. So I'd like to have some sense of the financial stability of this move. So those are kind of three big questions: the GTU, the library, and the financial nature of this change, and how stable Mills College is financially to take on a new graduate program with its primary purpose of being undergraduate students.
Okay. First of all, the entities that bought the LeConte property have a history of creating student housing. One of the reasons that we thought that they were a good person or persons to sell the property to is because they would be meeting a need that is an emergency in the state of California. Housing in general is an emergency here. And student housing is a particular emergency in the area in which the school is currently located. One of the things that we wanted to look at when we began this process was whether or not we might develop the property ourselves. But that exceeded the resources that the school had. And there was a sense that people didn't want to be into the real estate business. So even though it's sad to let go of the building, we're all very conscious that Starr King is not a building. Starr King is its people and its commitment and its history. So having said that, we believe that we have no idea what they plan to do with the physical building. We only know that their commitment is to building student housing. One of the reasons, by the way, that we didn't try to pursue this ourselves, in addition to the financial cost, is the incredibly difficult process by which anything gets done in Berkeley. The capacity of Berkeley to understand the housing emergency in California is at best limited right now. And we just felt that we didn't feel like spending years fighting with them because that's not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to educate progressive religious leaders, counter white supremacy, and create just and sustainable community. That's why we exist. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't get bound up in a process that was going to be too tough for us. So that's the building piece. The GTU relationship for now will stay exactly as it is. I cannot promise that that's going to be the case because the board is evaluating what our relationship with the GTU is. And I'll give you the most specific example. Our denomination supports us to the tune of $200,000 a year. That's not a lot, but it's important to us. It does the same thing for our sister school, Meadville Lombard in Chicago. But our commitments that comes with being a member school of the GTU amounts to $285,000 every year. So it exceeds the amount of money that our own denomination gives us to run the school. So that requires some evaluation. We aren't going to do anything right away, but the board will be continuing to take that under advisement because it is a huge financial responsibility for a student body that has changed. One of the reasons, for example, that Mills is exciting to us is that it may allow us to retain a high residence option. There are dormitory rooms available at Mills College. And as soon as we do a little more negotiating about space at Mills, we're going to try to find out how many of our students are prepared to live on campus at Mills. They have dorm space available, and it would be at a price comparable to the dorms at PSR, although apparently the dorms at PSR have disappeared for all except PSR students, which is another thing that has contributed to the housing crisis and the change in high residence, low residence proportion. When I came to Starr King 5.5 years ago, 60% of our students lived on campus or near campus, and 40% were distance learners. Now it's the exact opposite. 40% of our students live on campus or are near campus, and 60% of our students are distance learners. That has a direct relationship to the housing emergency in the state of California. And we're very conscious of that. So we're having to be nimble as we figure out these different opportunities. You asked one more question. The library, GTU. Did I answer all the things you asked me?
The third question was about the financial stability of Mills College, because I've seen as a professor at University of Vermont, other colleges closing and watching the state of other liberal colleges trying to figure out whether liberal arts is survivable into the 21st century. So of course, if Starr King's to survive, we would want Mills to be in a solid endowment, admissions, recruitment, all that kind of state.
Mills College is in the same state as theological education and theological schools. The hill that everybody thinks about when they think about the GTU is under similar pressures. The only 3 schools that are left as independent schools are Starr King and PSR and ABSW. That's the Baptist school. PSR is UCC and Methodist and several other denominations. But every other school has responded to the same pressures by becoming part or embedding in a larger institution. The Lutherans are now embedded in Pacific Lutheran University. The San Francisco Theological Seminary, which is Presbyterian, is now embedded in the University of Redlands. Episcopal School is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Trinity Wall Street in New York. They literally bought them. There is no school in the United States, unless you are Harvard or Liberty University, there's no theological school that isn't going through the exact same kinds of change. We are not embedded in Mills College. We are co-located at Mills College. Our faculty will remain intact. Our mission is the same. We will be working, however, in synergy with Mills to the degree that we are able and have a similar mission. Mills is struggling like many other colleges, but like Starr King, they are being nimble and innovative in the things that they're working on doing. We are one part of a strategic plan that they've created that will have partners on campus. They're still working on the other pieces of that partnership, but I found, and I think the board found, that the work that they were doing and the work that we were doing were similar enough to take a risk. If you're asking me to guarantee you that Mills won't have problems or troubles, I can't make that guarantee. But I can't make that guarantee about Starr King, except to say that Starr King is not going anywhere. We're not closing. And that's been a story that people have sort of, the rumor has been floating for a long time. But are we vulnerable in the same way that other theological schools are vulnerable? We absolutely are. So I'm sorry that I can't give you a guarantee or a set of details about either Starr King or Mills. There are still too many things that are in flux to do that. But I think that Starr King, as a small and independent theological school, is making the right moves at a good time to ensure its future. So as we continue in our negotiations and the things that we have to do, we'll be communicating like this. And I hope and encourage everybody to keep an eye out on the Futures and New Beginnings page so that you can keep up with what we're doing. As we are able to talk about things, we talk about them. So. Next questions from people.
Hi, Anya
Hi.
Wayne.
Hi, Anya.
How will this change affect the relationship with the Chaplaincy Institute?
Right now, it won't affect it at all.
Okay.
Chaplaincy Institute is also having its own re-envisioning. And so we are watching their process as well. So for now, that part doesn't change.
Okay. Well, the way that, because right now Starr King is very close geographically to the Chaplaincy Institute. Will the separation and distance change the way that classes are stacked or anything like that? Do you know?
I don't know that yet. It's too early to know that, but you know, of course, we're going to do everything we can to figure out the logistics of that and at least help you all figure out the logistics.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ivan. I'm Becca, and my main question is about access. And I'm sorry if you already talked about this and I missed it because I came in late. But how will we, especially people who are low residents and coming in from afar, how will we access Mills College?
Well, my first idea is that you'll definitely not fly into. If you're flying, you'll fly into Oakland Airport, which is pretty close to Mills College. The two public transportation stops are the Coliseum Station and the Fruitvale Station. There are buses that run from Coliseum and Fruitvale to the front door of Mills. Uber and Lyft do the same things. And one of the things we're also investigating is the shuttle that Mills runs from their front door gate at East Berkeley. It'll probably involve an extra fee for people, but they run a bus because because they have students who take classes or do other things at Berkeley, and two, because they have people who live on Mills campus, but who go to school at Berkeley. So all those things are things we're working on for folks so that we can help move things around. The logistics are going to be a little interesting, but there is public transportation and there is this capacity for a shuttle. Who's next?
And earlier I asked about the GTU library as a resource, and I wondered the same thing for the UC Berkeley resources, because both those assets were within walking distance of the current location. Will students still have access to those resources?
For now, yes. None of that has changed. The only part of that that could change is the issue about whether or not we decide to remain part of the Graduate Theological Union. And that is a decision that's some ways off. Even if we decided tomorrow that we didn't want to be part of the GTU, it's a process to leave. It wouldn't happen right away anyway. But one of the reasons that this is something that the board is considering in more depth is the capacity of our students to use the Berkeley Library and the GTU Library. Mills has its own library. It has 270,000 volumes. We would have to arrange a whole host of things in order to make that an opportunity for students to use. But there are no reciprocal arrangements at this moment. And so this requires further study on our part. That's why for now, nothing is changing. Yes, I see somebody's hand. Can't hear though. Sandra, did you mute everybody?
No, I'm not
Oh,
muted.
Okay, now
there we
go.
go.
There you go.
Okay.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Rosemary. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, except for my knee.
Oh, ouch.
And ouch is right. So that's why I'm not at the school right now.
Yeah. I'm wondering about the rare book room.
Mm-hmm.
Where are those where are they going to be living?
They'll be with us.
Oh, really?
One of the things that's important, and one of the things that ATS asked us about was the rare book room. And we are looking into a couple of options. One, we're trying to find out if Mills has space in its own rare book rooms for our volumes, because they do have rare book space. The other is in whatever place that we actually end up on the Mills campus, which is still under negotiation, whether we would build out a room that would hold our books. That would require putting them in storage for a while and then building the space out and then moving them back to us. And as I said, that's a thing that's under negotiation, but the rare books do not belong to the GTU. The rare books are ours. That is part of the agreement when all the different schools donated their books to the GTU library. So no matter what other decisions get made, the rare books come with us. They're an important resource and a big part of our legacy.
I would have a question.
Hello.
Hello, this is Erica.
Hi, Erica. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. There was a mention of chi, and I guess I have a follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me, just from what I know from my fellow students, that there remains a lot of deep interest in chi and the joint program, and in particular, the access to an alternative ordination path. Mm-hmm. For some folks, like you mentioned, chi is also very much in a period of reflection and change and some turmoil, I would venture to say. And so I'm just curious, I'm always wondering if there's been any dialogue about furthering or deepening or changing that relationship in some way. I hear a lot from people about a waiting list to be able to start at chi and some related heartache. I make an assumption that that's kind of a matter of financial funnel and, sort of spreading out tuition loss on Starr King's part. But is there any conversation about, like I said, deepening that relationship, or I guess in effect absorbing some of it just as part of a multi-religious school?
That's a great question, and that is a conversation that we've had internally. But you can't absorb an institution that doesn't want to be absorbed. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons that that part of the conversation has not gone further. One of the other things that we have thought about, that we have sort of put that conversation on hold, is whether or not we wanted to create a similar program within the school itself, because of the deep interest not only in interfaith ordination, but in spiritual direction, which is something that several people have spoken to us about. We're not quite ready to have that conversation on the deeper level, but it is very much on people's minds, because we don't know what will come of Chi's discernment. As I said at the beginning, unless you're Harvard or Liberty University, you are in this kind of reflection, sometimes turmoil, because it's a time of disruption in all these institutions, in all this institutional life. And those of us who are religious leaders in particular need to be aware of that. This allows me to mention something that I've been thinking about. Over the break, I have been reading a book by Susan Beaumont, who is a large church and large institutional leader. She used to be part of the Alban Institute, which did lots of church studies. And when they closed, which was a surprise to everybody, she went out on her own and continued to do this work. Her newest book is a book called How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going, which is a kind of hilarious title, but in fact reflects what she and other church leaders have been talking about, which is the huge disruption in theological education, in church life, in all these other systems, and what it means for those of us who have chosen these roles or have had these roles placed on us, of leadership in a time like this. And she talks about the importance of being nimble and open to the moving of the Spirit. And it's becoming a very meaningful book for me as I continue to read it, because it speaks very deeply to the times in which we find ourselves and the roles that we have as religious leaders. So I'm going to be encouraging people to buy that book and to read it. I'm certainly going to talk to the board about reading it. And what I may do is just sort of talk to people about reading it and then reflecting with me on it on a sort of regular basis, kind of a monthly check-in call about this. So if you find that you're interested in that kind of reflection, please let me know. And we'll be setting up a time like that for those of us who have this on our heart a great deal right now, because these are the kind of times we're living in. I just also want you to know that we're open to having conversations with Chi should they decide that that's a conversation that they want to have. But right this minute, that's not a conversation that they've indicated they want to have.
And I appreciate so much knowing that even that piece of information has been unclear to me. Okay. I'll share just for what it's worth, and I've shared this with Chi also, that I have wild enthusiasm for being a joint program student in the sense that I think if I had access only to Starr King or only to Chi, there would be some holes or places of incompletion for me. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's just so much to be said. I think particularly for those of us who feel sort of outside of the UU world and are watching all of the turmoil there these days, that feels a little spooky to become part of as a kind of newbie green bean. And so an alternative path is pretty interesting. That said, in terms of where the schools are coming, I think in terms of a value set, there's a lot that is aligned, and there are some pieces where there's less alignment. Mm-hmm. And so if there's ever a time to explore that or to have student input, I would have a lot to say. And otherwise, I would just say I appreciate the thought about leading in a time of such change, and I think it also takes some stamina as a student to be part of schools or schools that are in that change. And so for myself, I need to constantly come back to a place where I say, am I getting what I need? And despite my many frustrations, I always come back to a place where I say, Starr King is the right place for me, because of all of these values that you're talking about. And likewise, the joint program is good food and medicine for me. So anyway, so thanks for everything. And I really appreciate that info about Chi.
Well, I really appreciate you talking about Chi and being as forthright as you have been about both your desires and your frustrations. I can appreciate that. There are times when we're frustrated because their things are not working the way we want them to for all of you. But I also know that this is good practice for those of us who are in religious leadership. This is how it goes, more often than we'd like to admit. And we need to keep coming back, as you said, to what the core question is. For us at Starr King is, are we fulfilling our mission? Are we doing what we promised we would do? And will this next move take us closer to what our deepest values are and what we promise our students? So please know that every time we make a decision, that is right in the center of every conversation, both on the faculty and staff and as well as the board. It's crucial to how we do our work. So thank you, Erica.
Yeah, and thank you. And thank you for doing this today. So my last plea will just be, through this process, for me, more is more. The risk of repetition or like too much communication going out. Usually I'm a less is more person, but for this, I was more and more, just anything you can share is really appreciated. So
I'm glad to know that too. We've committed to trying to make sure that there's information on the site and that we try to send things out. I actually had this conversation with Meg McGuire, who's actually here on the call, who's our one of our student trustees. And I shared with her my fear of talking too much about this stuff and just making people crazy. And she's, especially when I didn't feel like I had enough to share because of confidentiality issues. And she's like, no, you should just keep doing that. So I'm going to keep doing that. What I can talk about, I will talk about. And I'm grateful that so many of you are on, because for some of you, it's nighttime. So more questions. I don't want people to leave feeling like they haven't had as much information as I am able to give. Anybody in the room out there? Because y'all look really tiny.
Rosemary, I do want to note that Jesse also threw in the chat, as a joint Starr King Chi student, I too would also be interested in being part of such conversations. Both institutions have been formative for me. Okay,
that's good to know. That is really good to know. Thank you, Jesse. And I know that these both mean a lot to you. And as you all know, they are challenged in some of the same ways, and in some ways more. They don't have an endowment, small as our endowment is in terms of, theological education in general. It's a lot bigger than theirs. And so they're struggling, and we know that. And we're doing what we can to be supportive. And to support you all who love it. So I see Lisa's hand.
I unmute myself. Hi, Rosemary. Hi, everybody. I just have a question about what our classroom spaces might look like, if they all look like traditional classrooms, or if we might have some access to some different kinds of spaces. Is there a theater that we might have access to? Is there what kinds of spaces might we be able to use?
Well, one of the things we're trying to work out is where we might be on campus. As I said, it's gigantic. And so right now, now that we're all back from vacation, it's time for us to start looking around at possible spaces where we would be located. We may not have a building of our own. We may have a section of a building of our own, but we need to be able to make sure that we can be found on this gigantic campus. Many of the classrooms are more traditional classrooms. Some of them are smart classrooms, so we'd have access to smart classrooms that we'd be able to use for, you know, hybrid classes. The classroom space, it will most likely be dictated by their registrar, because when you're on a campus that big, you just sort of say, here are the classes we're offering, and they schedule it where they can schedule it. At the same time, I am sure that depending on the classroom and the time of day, we would always be welcome at the Mills Chapel, which is a beautiful space all on its own. And I also wanted to mention that Dara Oland, who is a Starr King graduate, is the head of the chapel. And one of her great desires is to figure out a way to do an internship around people who have an interest in campus ministry, because Mills College has a lot of people who say that they don't like religion, but who nonetheless have deep spiritual needs. And that whole spiritual but not religious mythology really doesn't get examined in the way that it should. And one of the things that a lot of us know is that young people have a great deal of spiritual hunger, and who I think could be embraced by Unitarian Universalism or by another religious tradition that we might have available at Starr King. So one of the things that Dara and I are going to be talking about is whether or not the UUA would help us fund a kind of campus ministry internship on the campus of Mills College, because she is in full fellowship and able to supervise an intern. And that's just one of several opportunities that we're hoping we will be able to develop over time. In Mills' strategic plan, they include having or developing a set of partners who will join people on campus. Tech partners, education partners, healthcare partners. The healthcare partner is especially exciting to me because that would possibly allow us to create a CPE site on campus. And so whenever I would sit and talk to the dean or the provost or the president of Mills, and we'd start talking about the things that we might be able to do together, everybody got really excited. So I know that this is a big and very different way of looking at the future of Starr King, but I want to be really clear that I believe the future of Starr King and every other kind of institution like ours can be found in partnership and collaboration and in an arena of mutual respect. Very few people, institutions, schools are going to be able to stand alone in the coming years. And I did not, and the board did not want Starr King to be out there by itself, twisting in the wind in the face of all these incredible pressures that are on schools and students and faculty, just out here in the world. I think Mills looked around and said the same thing, that even though they have a decent endowment, that it would be difficult for them to continue without creating kinds of partnerships that they're in the process of creating. I was in a conversation with the provost, and she sort of laughed and said, you know, I didn't even know that there was another school like Mills out there. And she was talking about us. And I had to laugh and say, well, we didn't know there was a school like you, really. We didn't really understand the same, that you all have the same level of commitments and have the same values and have this broader vision about what education can do in the lives of people. So we think that there are lots of places to study. There are places to live. There are places to collaborate at Mills, and I am looking forward to that. I want to encourage people to not worry too much about the classrooms. We will have all that we need to teach. This also allows us to not have to consider an all online option, which was one of the things I personally feared most. I feared that we would not be able to have a standalone institution where people would gather only in intensive periods. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that when people come for their intensives, that there's a there, that there's a staff, and that there are students who've been coming in and out, and that there are people to greet you when you come. I think that Meadville does a great job educating students. And as I tell people many times, my mentor as a minister was a Meadville grad. So I believe in their education. But I also think it's harder for them to do formation because of the way they have to educate. And I think that as long as we can do a high residence option, we're committed to doing it. And for us, this was the way to get that done.
One follow-up question, is the chapel Zoom accessible or?
I don't know that yet. Dara and I are going to be talking about that. If it's not Zoom accessible, we should think about ways that we could do that. And I don't know how open she will be to that because the chapel is her purview. That's her wheelhouse, and I have to live with her rules. But I'm betting that there will be many opportunities for us to work together. And she got so excited when she heard the news, she didn't know what to do. So her brain is spinning just like mine is. We got all kinds of things we want to try to do. I see Jesse's hand.
Yeah, as someone with a deep interest in earth ministry, I'm wondering whether, and I bet you don't have any clues about this yet, but what I'd like to put on the table is, might there be spaces that can be used for instructional purposes and ritual purposes in the out of doors on campus? I think they have a fairly large I mean, I don't really know anything about Mills.
Wow, okay,
but
so I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm excited about that. Mills is 135 acres. You can be on campus at Mills and not know you're in Oakland. It's huge.
Okay, so just as a follow-up thought to that, not just for instructional, or I guess I'll say formational processes in a 1 hour or 5 hour setting, but maybe even a multiple day setting. I just want to sort of put that seed out there and see if it might fall on fertile ground for some time in the future.
I think that's a wonderful idea. I don't know how the logistics of that would work, but that's going to go on my list. I know they have a farm, for example. I know they have a farmer's market. I know that when they build on campus, their buildings are LEED, gold, and platinum, which in fact, I think the new business school, they have a graduate school of business, is a LEED platinum building. So their commitment to sustainability, to environmental justice, and sustainable community is real. So I think that there will be opportunities for us everywhere.
Another follow-up to that, I'm assuming that because of finances, among other things, Mills probably doesn't do what we're starting to call pay the rent to Indigenous communities. But that would be something else to maybe consider, because they are in a place, we would be, or at least our portion of it would be in a place that has come to us not just by grace, but by violence. So just thinking about that.
Absolutely. I would be amazed if they hadn't already thought of it, but I don't know where they are in that process. So sure.
I wonder if on, I have two things. One, I'm wondering if on the information FAQ page, there might be a link to Mill's strategic plan. So we could have a sense of how they're viewing these partnerships you're talking about and what you know, who the new company is going to be that Starr King becomes part of. And also to pick up on the earlier comments from Earth Ministry in the sense of place, I wonder if students here or staff or faculty would be interested in some kind of an archiving project collecting memories of this place and stories of those 77 years, because I think we can be fairly certain the building will be destroyed. This would not be the kind of building you would want to turn into student housing for efficiency and good rents and number of units. And wishing for that is probably too nostalgic. So the next best thing is to somehow collect what we've gained in this place over 77 years and make some kind of, you know, I don't know, book or display and I feel sort of similarly about a ritual. Where I'm living in Portland, many buildings are being destroyed for new buildings and trees taken down, etc. And I feel fairly thoughtlessly. So if we can at least honor the history that's been here in the process of the move, I think that will help with a lot of grief, because the next time you come back, you see, you know, dirt and a bulldozer. So I just wanted to throw that suggestion out there, and also in a way of learning more about mills, however we can find out what are the other graduate programs without doing, I mean, you could search all over their website, but we kind of need to know what's relevant, both physically and sort of who else is using the classrooms and the library space. Who are the newcomer on the block? What's the competition going to be for the deans and provosts' attention? Are we tiny compared to the business school? Kind of, who are the new neighbors and how do you get along with them? So those two areas, I just, is what's coming to me right now as someone who was here a while ago.
Well, those are great suggestions, Stephanie, and you should know that those things are already in process. We've already walked through the building to think about the things that we want to take with us. Fred, who is the longest lived of our staff, Fred Williamson, our facilities manager, has already figured out how to take the threshold off the front of the building, because the threshold has to come with us. And so we've been walking around trying to think about those things that are meaningful to us that we can take as we go. So please know that that is very much part of the thinking already on the part of staff. Some things won't be able to come with us, but the things that we can't, I think we're taking the head and the back in the in the parking area. We're just looking around to see what's going to matter to us, what's going to be a touchstone, what's going to help people make this transition. So please know that's on our hearts already. And as for who the partners are, they're still negotiating who the partners are, but they do have a partnership document that I think I can hijack and put on our page, or put a link to our page. And so we'll be working on that in the next week or so. So please pay attention to that. We'll look for that. And thank you for that suggestion. That's really helpful.
And this is speaking as a low resident student. Will there be, will people coming in for intensives be able to stay on the Mills campus? Or is that still in the investigation phase?
It's what we're trying to investigate is price. There is the capacity to do that. When we first began to talk to them, we said that there were two kinds of housing that would be important for us to try to identify. One would be people who wanted to be high residents and live on the campus. And the other would be people who came in for classes. This will not be free, however. One of the things that we balance this with is home hospitality program that we have from people who are willing to have people stay while they're taking classes. That's important for us to maintain if we can. But there will be an opportunity to live on campus. It will, however, add to the cost of coming. And so that's something that we have to nail down so that students can make an informed choice by the time August gets here, because that's when it will matter a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to ask about parking?
Actually, Rosemary, I have a question about parking.
How did I know? How did I know somebody's going to ask about parking? No, you won't be able to play Tetris anymore in the back. I'm so sorry.
I have put all these years worth of effort into that.
I know, and you're so good at it.
You're so good.
So here's how parking works at Mills. You buy a parking sticker, a thing that hangs on your, and then you park wherever you want, except for things that are specifically designed or say only for faculty or only for staff. So it's first come, first served all over campus. And some places will be closer than others. And I do know that some buildings have golf carts, but I don't know how those golf carts run. It may be that before it's all over, we have to buy a couple of golf carts for those of us whose knees are given out, and a couple of other things. But there's a lot more parking than there is where we are right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, particularly from the room? I want to make sure that I at least address anything that's sort of lingering in your head. I understand that this is a huge change. And so I really want to try to honor people's questions and concerns, even if I can't fully answer them right now. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just would like to articulate a really obvious concern on the part of us low-res folks. The housing, any housing expense adds significantly to the extra added expense that we already have by covering our transportation. And that will be a particular barrier for people who are not wealthy. You know, I mean, it's, we have a lot of students who I think really couldn't afford to add that to their pot of fiscal responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be a shame if we lost some of the voices that I value so much that are in the room for that reason. So I just want to lift that up.
I totally agree. It's one reason we don't want to give up on the home hospitality option. I know that home hospitality is the reason that many people are able to attend low residence. And I don't believe that we're going to stop doing that. But I also know that for some people, that is possible for them to come and stay on campus. The logistics are going to be a little wonky the first year. I am guessing that people will miss the shuttle or something else will happen. And we know that it will be a change for people, but especially because a lot of our home hospitality is in Berkeley, and people will have to travel from Berkeley to Oakland. And as someone who lives in Oakland and travels to Berkeley every day, it's not easy to do that if you don't have a car. I drive in part because it's just a really long schlep. That's part of what it means to do public transportation in the East Bay. I've never quite understood why things are not close to other things and why buses don't run the way they should. But that's my own New York City, Chicago bias about how public transportation runs. So I'm very much aware that the shuttle will be important, and trying to figure out how to schedule classes will be important. We're going to be asking for your patience as we work out those things. They're not always going to be smooth, but we think eventually they will be a useful thing for everybody. Last call for questions.
Well, I just don't want to hog the floor. I'm kind of trying to practice my why am I talking question, but I'm wondering about the local churches and feeling like I know they all have different personalities and different sized congregations and their own struggles, but on a kind of human to human level, can they somehow step up a little bit to know that there's a need in the area for transportation help, hospitality help, shuttle help, some way that they can be part of the solution and feel like they are supporting ongoing theological education. And I say this because we didn't get an intern this year, which we've had every other year in Portland at the big church. And I wondered, what the heck, what's going on? Where are the great people that we really want to support? And I feel strongly as an educator, how do we make it as easy as possible? And I think the churches should step up in there if there's any way they can, and maybe it'll take too much coordination, but it seems like they're kind of out of the loop. So I guess that's one question. Is there some way to spark that?
Well, first of all, it depends on which church you're talking about. The church in Berkeley, the main church in Kensington, has been a huge, huge help in terms of home hospitality. One of their members who's on our board, Linda Laskowski, has almost single-handedly put together the home hospitality network for our students. And over the years, I think they've saved the students about $250,000 in housing costs. She has actively recruited people in the church so that people can stay at their house, and she houses people herself. Mm-hmm. So the Oakland Church has not been part of this so much up till now. It's harder, I think, for its members to have homes available. But their new minister, Teresa, has already spoken to me about ways in which their church might be helpful. And as you say, the churches all have their different struggles. And I just want to float for people that at one point, one of the things that was under discussion was a renewal of the original plans for the Pacific Unitarian Church and Divinity School. Those plans existed in 1890. There was a desire on the part of Berkeley Unitarians to create a church and divinity school combined, and they had drawings and plans for it.
Nice.
And it was an astonishing thing to look at. If you've ever been to Yale Divinity School, you'll see it has these kind of corridors with arches and a tower and things like that, and that's what it looked like. But the financial collapse of 1894 destroyed that dream. And so instead they just built a church, the original home of the Unitarian Church of Berkeley. And then 10 years later, Starr King, where the Pacific Unitarian School of Religion began in the parish hall of the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. That was our first home. So it would take, there was a meeting at which representatives of all the local churches came together to see whether or not it was possible to revive that dream. The problem is that it would take 7 to 10 years for everyone to sell all their assets and decide on a space and just figuring out where that space would be. And much as we love the idea of being part of something like that, our needs were too urgent for a 7 to 10 year plan. But please know that that conversation did occur. Wow. And no one was more surprised than me to know that 100+ years ago, there was an original plan for a school and church combined. It was pretty cool, actually.
Lindy put in the chat, being in
Oakland. Go ahead.
Okay, being in Oakland will open up opportunities to see if we can expand home hospitality beyond the Kensington Church to the Oakland and Hayward and Walnut UU congregations. Perhaps City of Refuge Bishop Flinders congregation could consider inviting members to offer home hospitality.
That's absolutely true. We will be not very far from Bishop Flinders Church, which is in East Oakland. and near Coliseum. So there are all these opportunities that we will be able to begin exploring. As I said, it will take time, but we, I think, are entering this amazing new phase where we get to be in a city that has a lot of richness and opportunity and a lot of difficulty and despair, and where we will be called upon to live our faith in all the ways we say we want to, but sort of don't get to do. We're hanging out in Berkeley, right? I think that we can make some amazing connections in East Oakland. This is also a part of Mills's deep desire to be a more outward-facing institution. They were a hair's breadth away from having a joint plan with a developer for a supermarket, because East Oakland is a food desert. And the developer pulled out at the last minute. So they're back on trying to find that particular partner. Meanwhile, they have a farmer's market with food that they grow on the Mills campus. So when I said they have a farm, I'm not kidding. It's a small farm, but it's a farm. The opportunities to do earth waste practice, to do environmental justice, to do food justice work, all the things that we talk about in our varying classes are very live and present on the Oakland campus. And that was what drove a lot of the excitement that we had, that we could live our faith differently if we moved. So it's after 6:30 and I've kept you all enough. I got too excited and I talked over time. Sorry about that. So I want to thank all of you for being on here. I want to thank those of you in the room who came. I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to greet you personally. If you're in town and are going to be around for a while, I will try to. I got a cane today, so I'm hoping I can limp on into school in a couple of days. Certainly in time for symposium. For those of you who are in town for We Are Starr King Week, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. There are other things that are going to be going on this week, and I hope to see you there. And for those of you who start school, have a wonderful semester. And I'll see you around campus. You'll notice me, I'm the limping person with the blue cane. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.